Good morning, welcome to another video. And it's Friday morning and finally it's happened. It is a beautiful day, the sky is clear, the sun is coming up. It's coming up just over my shoulder there. I came out to the park because it's such a nice morning, get a bit of a longer walk in. And if this doesn't make you want to get out for a walk, I don't know what will. But it's just after 7:30, maybe 7:45, and it's a little bit cold, but we'll warm up. But yeah, beautiful morning, instant good mood. We've got a river running alongside there, walking through some trees. It's a good place to be. So today is Flexibility Friday. So I said I would share some footage, share some stretches. So what I did this morning is I got up, turned the camera straight on, and I got dressed first. Turned the camera straight on and did a little morning kind of mobility routine that I like to do. Hopefully it's useful. The footage is a little bit shit, but I wanted to film it in a small little space where I normally do this stuff. You can do this stuff anywhere, you don't need much room. So if you can roll out like a yoga mat, that's all the space you need. So I'll run through that. I've also got some footage from the gym yesterday where I did some static stretches. I'll often do these a couple of times a day, maybe during the evening before I go to bed, before or after a workout. Any time is good if you just want to loosen up a little bit. So I'll share that footage as well. But before we go over to all that stuff, a couple of key important things about stretching that I wanted to talk about. So first is breath is incredibly important. Stretching isn't just a thing you do with your muscles, it is a thing you do with your breath. You can, but it's a bad idea. You can hold your breath while you're stretching, but what that does is your body reacts to that in a pretty negative way. You hold your breath, your body will tense up, your body will panic. It will think something's going wrong, something bad is happening. And of course something bad is not happening. You're just trying to stretch, you're trying to loosen up your muscles. So breathe, really, really important. And you'll find that, and I've shared this in a previous video, breathing calmly will help increase your range of motion. So what I mean by that is, if you right now, let's say you can't touch your toes at the moment, try and touch your toes, right? Lean over, reach for your toes, go as far as you can. Once you get to the kind of limit of where you can go, take a deep breath, try and breathe like right into your belly. And as you breathe out, kind of with a slow, calm, try and just melt a little bit, melt your body further down, reach a little bit further towards your toes. And I can almost guarantee, there might be some cases where this doesn't work, but I can almost guarantee that you will find a little bit more range of motion. You can take a breath, your body expands, your chest cavity, maybe your belly expands if you can breathe into your belly. And then as you release, your whole body will just kind of loosen up a little bit more. And you can use that to your advantage while you're stretching. It will help you stretch, it will make stretching more comfortable, and it will help you relax in general. So after you're done stretching, you will feel more relaxed. The next kind of important thing about stretching is that we tend to sit or lie down for most of our week, right? If you're driving to and from work, or maybe you drive for work, if you're sitting at a desk, there's the time you spend in bed, the time you spend sitting down for dinner. So it's hours and hours and hours where you're not moving, right? If you stretch for 5 minutes once a week, it's not really going to do anything for you. I mean, it might be a nice little relaxing stretch session, but it's not going to improve your flexibility. It's not going to improve your mobility. So it's important you do this every day, ideally multiple times a day. You can stretch out for just 5 minutes, 3 times a day, every day. Remember, we're all about consistency here, showing up every day, and it will make a big difference. So I'm going to jump over to the stretching footage now. Like I said, morning routine, I just got out of bed, threw into the clothes, did this. The reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to show my kind of mobility or flexibility before and after the stretch. So I try and touch my toes, run through some movement exercises, and then go touch my toes again, and you can see I've increased my range of motion. And now that I'm out walking, I'm kind of feeling loose, feeling limber. I think if you've got arthritis, this is not just a good habit, but an essential habit to get into. Then, like I said, some gym footage. I'm going to go walk around the park for a bit, probably capture some nice sunny morning footage, and maybe share that at the end. But enjoy. As always, any questions, throw them in the comments. And yeah, have a great day. Okay, so here's my morning routine. So I'll start out by just kind of doing a little flexibility test. I'm pretty flexible even first thing in the morning, so I can reach the ground, but we'll get a bit more range than that. So the first thing I want to do here is basically just get down onto all fours and rock back and forth. So this is just a general limbering up movement. Get the hips moving and get the shoulders moving a little bit. Interestingly, I'll switch to the side now in a second, but if you look at this motion, if you were to rotate me 90 degrees, it's a squat. I mean, it's basically a squat. If you turn me around so my feet are flat on the ground, that would be a squat kind of motion. So if you're struggling with a squat, struggling with depth on a squat, I think this is a great thing to do. A couple of times a day, just loosen up and build up that range of motion. So it's just some general movement. Next, I just do some nodding up and down, so limbering up my neck a little bit. The spine is kind of one of the main things I'm working here. And again, with these, I'm looking back, trying to look at my heels. So this is kind of bending the spine sideways. So just gentle movements to get the spine moving, because that's generally where I'm most stiff first thing in the morning. Spondylitis, that's, it impacts the spine. So next, shoulder dislocations. I did these in the gym footage the other day as well, between sets when I was resting. So I think these are great. I'd always leave that band on the couch here so that anytime during the day I can just grab it. We spend a lot of our time, I'm doing it right now, I'm leaning on the desk, I'm arching forward, so getting your shoulders back, doing these sorts of, this is called a shoulder dislocation. So doing this is just good for getting your shoulders moving, improving the control you have on that joint, and improving the range of motion. So ideally over time you'd be kind of moving your hands closer together on the band and still be able to get that up and overhead. When you start, you might need to have your hands spread pretty far apart. So I try and keep it pretty loose with these sorts of warm-ups. It's not rigid. Whatever needs moving, I'll move. At this point then I'm just lying down, getting up on my elbows. This is putting my spine in some extension. So we spend most of our day kind of leaning over, so our spine is kind of arched over like kind of like a hill. But if you want to get some extra mobility in your spine, you need to spend some time in extension like this. So it's basically, now this is having a kind of curve, the opposite curve in your spine. I will, depending on the day, depending on the time of day, I will sit in that position for a long time. This just increases the extension so that it creates more of a bend in the spine. That may be too uncomfortable for you, so you can just stay in your elbows. But I think it's important to spend a bit of time with your spine in extension like this. In the evenings, I might sit there for 2 minutes just with my spine bent back like that. Next, I'm continuing with the spine. So if you do yoga, this would be familiar as a cat camel or a cat cow. I've heard it called both. It'll be more obvious when I switch to the side here now. Basically, you're trying to arch and then extend. So push your upper back up to the ceiling and then push your belly down to the ground. The important thing here is when you're pushing your belly to the ground, you are exhaling. And then as you arch your back up and over, you are inhaling. So this movement should be going in tandem with your breath. So breathe in, breathe out. And again, repeat this for as long as you like. Sometimes I'll spend, a minute, 2 minutes doing this sort of movement. Here I just throw in some side to side. Again, this morning routine is largely about whatever feels good to you, whatever movement you feel you need based on how stiff you are on that day. Next, I'll just get into a deep squat. Now, for a lot of people, this will be way too deep. A lot of people will struggle to get into this position. If you do, you can just lift your heels, put your hands on the ground in front of you. The key thing is you've got your body is trying to slide almost in between your legs, right? So your hips, as you come down into the squat, you'll see here, your torso is almost sliding in between, right? And that means your knees are pressing out to the side. You'll notice my feet are turned out a little bit. Here I'm just throwing in this movement. This is actually quite difficult to do. It's a movement for your thoracic spine, I guess, and your shoulder health and your shoulder mobility. So I like to spend a lot of time throughout the day. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I'll just drop down into this squat and loosen up my hips a bit, and it feels great. So now we're back to the toe touch. I feel like I've unlocked a bit of extra range of motion. I can push my hands further to the ground, and I can even grab my feet or grab the back of my ankles and pull myself into a deeper position. So that's the morning routine. Pretty simple. It changes day to day, but yeah, that's it. So I had to stop and get some footage of this place in here. Look at it. I've walked by this so many times and I never realized it was here. It's beautiful. We've got, I don't know, I guess the river maybe splits over there. Comes down this way, comes around this way. We've even got a little island thing in the middle here. This is a cool little spot just hidden in a bush that I've walked by so many times. But yeah, great find. Okay, so now we've got our static stretching routine. So in the previous routine, I was doing some stretching, I was staying in position for a while, but I was moving more, and I was trying to create movement. I'd been lying in bed all day, so when I get up, I want to move. These stretches are much more static. So here, what I'm stretching is my hip flexor. So whichever leg is on the ground here, my right leg, you should be feeling this stretch kind of going from your knee up through your hip and even up to that shoulder. We spend a lot of time sitting, so it's good to stretch out the hip flexor, which is just in the front of your hip there. And then I just extend my leg out and go into a hamstring stretch. I feel this one deep in my kind of the back of my knee, where the hamstring inserts into the knee at that point. Again, really important to breathe into this. It will help with your range of motion. It will help stay comfortable as you're doing these stretches. And then I just grab my leg. Again, this is stretching out the hip flexor again, but it gets more emphasis on my quad, which is the kind of front of your leg there. And yes, I'm touching the hip flexor there, and that's where I'm feeling the stretch kind of just running up my body. Swap sides, I stay about 20-30 seconds in each of these positions. So again, swap sides, stretching out the hip flexor. If you want, in this position, if you want to get a little bit more out of the stretch, you can lift up the arm that's on the side where your knee is on the ground. So there I go, arm goes up. That will give me a bit more of a stretch. Now the important thing is, you see I'm tucking my rib cage down there. You don't want your back to arch and your rib cage to flare, because then you're going to lose the stretch that you have on the hip flexor. And again, we go straight out into our hamstring stretch. You can curl the toes under or have your foot straight out on the back leg. It doesn't really matter here. The important thing is you're breathing into the stretch. And you're feeling that at the hamstring, so that's kind of between your knee and your glute, that big long muscle there. You'll feel it a little bit in your calf as well. And again, watch your balance as you go to grab your back foot and get that big stretch on the quad. So this is kind of the front of the leg, back of the leg, and hip flexors covered with this quick stretch here. I do these literally every night before bed. If I'm watching TV or something and I know there's 20 minutes left in the show, I just jump on the floor and start doing these stretches. This one's one of my favorite. If you've got like a sore lower back, tight or weak glutes can actually be a contributing factor to that. So what I'm doing here is crossing one foot over the opposite knee and then grabbing the back of my leg. I'll have a different view in a second where you'll see this a bit easier. But basically the leg that is crossed over, you will be feeling this along the outside of the leg and into the glute. It's a great one just for loosening up. One of my favorite stretches. There's a few different ways you can do it. You can use a wall if you want, but I think this does fine for most cases. So here, cross the leg over the knee, then I straighten the other leg, reach my hands through the gap, and then I'm actively pulling back.
Depending on your level of flexibility and mobility, you may be able to pull harder and pull your knee in kind of closer to your chest. But again, go to a point that's comfortable, and then go a little bit further than that, and hold the stretch and breathe. Always remember to breathe. Really, really important. So, kind of last thing I do to wrap up here is I'm just kind of stretching out my lower back, stretching out my hamstrings again. So I'm going to just sit and reach for my toes. Now, if you can only get to your knees or to your shins or to your ankles, whatever it is, you just go there and sit there and breathe. Breathe deeply. As you breathe out, try and lean into the stretch. So you might be able to see I'm kind of breathing here, and as I'm breathing out, I'm kind of pulling myself deeper and deeper into the stretch. So the longer I'm in the stretch, the deeper I can go, and it's controlling my breath that is actually helping me do that. So again, you'll feel a bit of this in your kind of lower back, you'll feel it in your hamstrings, maybe in your calves a little bit as well. And lastly, I already mentioned I like staying in this deep squat position, so I'll always jump in, maybe move, push my arms and elbows on the inside of my knees, move around a bit, and that will just open up the hips and keep your hips nice and loose. So my spine and my hips, that's the main places I feel arthritis. So I spend a lot of time making sure that they're loose and mobile and feeling good. I'll stretch out, go from squat to hamstrings, and that's it. That's the whole routine.